DePaul, Chicago's College Connection. We are joined now by Russell S Baxter of Yahoo Sports and Bleacher Report, a featured columnist on both of those sites. Russell, are you with us?
I certainly am, Eli. How are you?
I'm terrific. And again, Eli Hershkovich alongside Tom Bostwick talking NFL with you today. And let's dive into the Super Bowl first, Russell. Again, Malcolm Smith being named the Super Bowl MVP now along next to Dexter Jackson and Ray Lewis within these past 14 years. Again, in the past decade or plus 4 years added on to that. So if you were the main voter in the Super Bowl MVP voting, would you have picked Malcolm Smith? And Tom and I were talking before the show started. He would have maybe picked up Percy Harvin because that completely switched the momentum if Peyton Manning got the ball, if the Broncos got a stop and on the Seahawks' first possession of the second half. So would you have stuck with Malcolm Smith?
Well, let's see. 9 tackles, a fumble recovery, a pass defense, and a 69-yard interception return for a touchdown. I mean, he scored as many touchdowns as Percy Harvin, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
If I was going to go a second chance, I would have gone Cam Chancellor.
Ooh, I like that.
Percy Harvin.
Yeah, Tom's a big Cam Chancellor fan here. And as well as that, the Seahawks also have some free agents that could be on the move or be staying in Seattle sooner than later.
No, absolutely. You mentioned Cam Chancellor. They locked him up, I think, last year to a 4-year deal. Could be 2 years ago. But obviously, Wilson and Sherman, they got on the cheap because of, a third-round and a fifth-round pick, respectively. But Earl Thomas's rookie deal is coming to an end. And Michael Bennett, obviously, was only a 1-year deal. So where do you see them going this offseason? There's been some talk maybe they extend Thomas this year and then wait to extend Wilson and Sherman until after next season?
Yeah, that would probably make sense. I mean, they've pushed all the right buttons. Ever since that regime got there, they've made a lot of moves, a lot of trades. And it was really a 4-year rebuilding process for them, even though they managed to make the playoffs, 3 years ago with a 7-9 record and win a playoff game, as a matter of fact, while they were rebuilding. But, they've drafted very well. You mentioned Michael Bennett. That would be obviously somebody they might want to bring back. Golden Tate is a free agent. And the beauty of free agent, of course, is we basically still have a month for these guys to get re-signed. While certain now, like if you're the Atlanta Falcons, you just let Asante Samuel and Stephen Nicholas gone. I mean, they can be signed by anybody right now. So all 32 teams have a lot of work to do. Are they going to designate anyone a franchise player? But the Seahawks have pushed all the right buttons so far, so it'll be interesting to see who they retain and who they bring back. Inevitably, they're going to lose some people. But if they keep this core together, it could be a fascinating thing to watch in terms of them trying to repeat.
As you mentioned, the Seahawks have a lot of free agents and a lot of people that they could be given extensions to this offseason, but they also have in that class one of the best cornerbacks in football, Richard Sherman, and in your article, today's best cornerbacks and their throwback comparisons on Bleacher Report. Your headline photo is Richard Sherman, but one cornerback you did not mention in that piece was Charles Tillman, and he's also a free agent for the Chicago Bears. If you had a throwback comparison for Charles Tillman, a peanut-like ball puncher of the past, do you have a guy that you can compare to a Charles Tillman in the past of the NFL?
Well, Charles Tillman, not a real big guy, but a nose for the ball type of guy. The Redskins used to have a cornerback named Pat Fisher, who you could draw some comparisons to. But Tillman's ability to strip the football it's not like older defensive backs, going back in the era where you could hit a little more, where jarring hits rip the football loose. Charles Tillman just has that knack for stripping the ball. And, that can be done. That can be a good thing and sometimes a bad thing in terms of missing tackles. But he doesn't seem like he misses a lot of tackles. But, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him, too. I think he's kind of decided he's going to test the market and see what his value is.
You mentioned, obviously, Tillman, if he's going to test the market, there's some other guys, Tim Jennings and Henry Melton, some other key contributors on this defense that are free agents also for this Bears team. So if Tillman's going to test the market, do you think the Bears are going to go after Jennings and Melton a little more then?
Well, I think they probably need to get Henry Melton under contract before the free agent market hits. I know he only played 3 games last year, but you're talking about a defense that finished dead last in the league against the run. And they missed a lot of guys last year. I'm not going to say they missed Henry Melton more than others, but, missing the interior of your line along with other guys as well. I would think they would try to get Melton secure, and he never hits the free agent market. They might attempt to do that maybe with Jennings as well. But I get the feeling that that Tillman is not a guy necessarily going to bring back. I mean, Tillman's one of those. Tillman, Lance Briggs, if I remember right, all came in about the same year in the NFL draft, and depending. It's a young man's game. So you then see some of these guys test the market. Now what happens, though, is somebody like Tillman could test the market, not find a lot of suitors, and wind up coming back to Chicago. But I think he's going to at least try.
And again, the Bears love their Peanut Tillman, and they have Tim Jennings as well, as Tom mentioned, and Henry Melton. But they have their draft needs as well. And looking towards the draft, and Mel Kiper Jr. suggested that the Bears should draft Timmy Jerrigan, a defensive tackle of Florida State this past season. Do you believe the Bears in the first round are going to look for a defensive tackle, which could be a need, and they maybe let go of Henry Melton and also Collins at the defensive tackle position as well, who was lost for the season? Or will they go for a cornerback? What way do you think the Bears will go? Because offense obviously is not the problem.
Well, if I'm the Bears, I don't let go of anybody defensively, especially the guys who were hurt last year. Just because you draft somebody else at the same position, you don't let go of who you got. I mean, I was talking with somebody in Houston today, and the prospects of what their number one pick is going to be. Do you not take Jadeveon Clowney because you already have J.J. Watt? I mean, how'd you like to have those two guys together? How about a young defensive tackle? They need bodies on the defensive front. That defense was horrendous last year. The Bears gave up more than 200 points than they did the previous year. Only the Vikings gave up more points than the Bears last year, and not all of that was injuries. I think that's also by design as well. I think Mel Tucker obviously under a lot of scrutiny, so I don't think drafting a defensive tackle in the first round means they're going to give up on Henry Melton.
Yeah, you mentioned that defense last year was just absolutely atrocious. Looking at the draft, though, sort of bigger picture across the league, obviously there's been a lot of talk about the Texans and that number one pick, Johnny Manziel, Teddy Bridgewater, Blake Bortles, or even, Jadeveon Clowney to match up on the other side of J.J. Watt. Where do you see them going? Or if you were the GM of the Texans, do you go best available? Do you go need? Or what do you do?
Well, I think Clowney appears to be one of those guys you don't want to pass on. And I still want to see what Bill O'Brien makes up his mind doing in terms of the quarterback situation. I'm not saying you bring Matt Schaub back and he's the starter next year, but I'll use this analogy. As a quarterback mechanic, which Bill O'Brien is, he has to look under the hood himself when it comes to Matt Schaub. He seems like the quarterback that's lost his confidence more than anything else. And I think his performance last year caused his team to lose confidence. Those pick sixes early in the year were demoralizing on a week-by-week basis. Now, does that excuse the fact that they lost their last 14 games? No. But I think you have to do your due diligence if you're Bill O'Brien and figure out, well, can Matt Schaub still play? Can I take a quarterback in the second round? Can I take arguably the best player with the first overall pick? Can I move down to somebody who really, really wants Clowney? And, maybe pick up some extra picks, because inevitably when you're 2-14, you've got some holes to fill. I mean, I know Kansas City went from 2-14 to 11-5, but they also slumped at the end of the year last year. So not all was totally well with the Chiefs. So I'll be interested to see what they do. I think people will start, historically thinking about when the Texans had the number one pick and they, Mario Williams, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that has anything to do with it. But boy, it would be fun to see J.J. Watt and Clowney on the same team. It would just be really fascinating.
I agree with that. And looking at the Texans' philosophy year coming up, they were in the divisional round just 2 years ago, losing to the New England Patriots. And looking at, as you were talking about, Bill O'Brien's philosophy and what he had a quarterback just a few years ago at Penn State, before he, I believe he had Matt McGlynn at Penn State. Yeah, Matt McGlynn at Penn State. Just a pocket passer, and I didn't think he was going to make it in the NFL, but look what he did with the Raiders in a few football games. He surprised a lot of people, especially on Thanksgiving Day, where he put up some solid numbers. So looking at a Johnny Manziel, will Bill O'Brien look towards that, Or as we saw in the Super Bowl, that Russell Wilson in the third round, do Super Bowl contenders, and can the Texans get back to that spot pretty quickly? Do Super Bowl contenders need to go after a quarterback that early, or can they find a key guy in the second or third round, or even go back to Tom Brady in the sixth round?
Well, I mean, let's not push it with going to the sixth round. Okay, listen. Those things kind of happen every once in a while. Kurt Warner not being drafted happens every once in a while. Okay, I'm not saying it can't happen.
Right.
But, you look at the quarterbacks in the NFC the last 2 years to get the Super Bowl. Colin Kaepernick in the second round, Russell Wilson in the third round. So, if the one thing about the Texans, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not like they're picking first and then 60th. They're picking first and 33rd. Okay? Right. So it's still pretty. 33 is still a pretty high pick, and it's not inconceivable that one of the quarterbacks come down there. I mean, I know we're going to talk about 4 or 5 quarterbacks going in the first round. That's what we're saying now. We haven't even got to the combines and the individual workouts. We also get 2 extra weeks this year to scrutinize these kids because the draft is not until May 8th. So I'll be interested to see the entire evaluation process. And of course, they do have a couple quarterbacks on the roster with Keenum and Yates, but I think I'll be curious to see if he kicks the tires and makes a quick decision on Schaub and decides to go clean. But I think if you're the Texans, that's a big. They went from 12-4. They lost 10 more games than they did the year before. I mean, that's a plummet, and that's not to say you can't bounce back real quickly. But remember, they also have a new defensive coordinator there as well. So I mean, Wade Phillips is gone, and I still think it's a team that builds its bones on defense. And having a good defense isn't the worst thing in the world. I know we're all obsessed with this quarterback-driven league thing, but all you had to do was see last Sunday, and that wasn't just about defense Sunday. That was about complete team.
Right. Absolutely. The Seahawks offense obviously doesn't get talked about a ton, but you mentioned you can obviously win with dominant defense. I think it'd be interesting though if the Texans do wait till the second round and maybe they pick up Derek Carr late in the second round, see if they can get better luck with the younger Carr. But one more question here for you, Russell, is looking at Sammy Watkins and Mike Evans and Marquise Lee too. These three. Hang on,
I'm going to stop you right there. I have not broken down any receivers.
Okay,
that's not what I do.
Okay.
So I don't want to give you a false impression. I'm not Mel or Todd.
All right.
So we'll wait on that, Russell. But let's talk about this.
I'm not a breakdown guy anyway. I take it from the NFL lens. So
right. Let's talk about the Seahawks receivers then here really quick.
Okay.
Talking about Curse and talking about Golden Tate as well. The Seahawks go from a receiving core when they were in the Super Bowl in 2005 of a Darrell Jackson, a Bobby Ingram, having big time names, and winning a Super Bowl with no namers, and then Baldwin comes into the press conference and he calls out Chris Carter. I'm sure you saw that. So what do you think about the Seahawks receiving core winning a Super Bowl like this? Can NFL teams model off the Seahawks like they can off their defense, and can they do it off their offense, not only the quarterback in the second and third round, but can they do it off their wide receivers as well?
Well, let me ask you this first off. I think just for point of parliamentary procedure here. Did Doug Baldwin call anyone out, or was he responding to something?
He was responding.
I'm going to say Tom's saying that because he's a Seahawks
Chris
fan.
Carter called him appetizers, and Doug Baldwin, Jermaine Kearse had heck of games.